Hello, everyone. Welcome to DiligenceVault webinar on the topic of fund selection and active management, together with the Association of Professional Fund Investors, APFI. My name is Guillaume Rouault. I'm the Director of Business Development in EMEA, and I'll be introducing you shortly to the webinar moderator and the panel. Thank you all for your engagement. A few housekeeping notes. We will keep this discussion as close to an hour as possible. Feel free to use the Zoom's Q&A feature to send in questions throughout the discussion, and we will address as many as possible during the last 20 minutes. This discussion is not for press attribution, and you can see a poll now in front of you. Please participate in the poll, and we will share the result in the post-webinar takeaways. A quick note, if you don't know about us at DiligenceVault, we're a two-sided digital diligence platform that facilitates more effective due diligence and information exchange between investors and their asset managers. Like everything else we do, today's webinar is meant to be collaborative between DiligenceVault and the members of our ecosystem and the broader investment community. If you would like to learn more about us, to set up a demo with our team, or to get on the mailing list with our future webinars, email us at ask@diligencevault.com. Now, let me introduce Gandidzwanwa from Conceptual Fund Managers, co-chair of APFI, who will be moderating the panel and leading the conversation forward. Gandhi, over to you.
Thank you, Guillaume. And good afternoon to all of you who are joining us today for this webinar. Good morning, good evening to some, depending on from which part of the world you are dialing in. It's really a pleasure to be having you joining us today for this webinar. So really, if there is one thing that's clear right now, is that 2020 is coming to an end. And I can imagine, all of us ready to celebrate the entry of 2021. But also, if there is another thing that's just as clear, is that we are in an industry that has experienced 5 years of development and evolution over just a period of 6 months. And to me, that's really what makes 2020 such a special year for the investment management industry. In 6 months, in just under 6 months, we have adopted, and we're still busy embracing, a new worldview that for the past 20 years, if not even more, we had just not paid any particular attention to. The question is, what's the professional fund investors' take on all of this? And to help me unpack that question, I've with me here a team of panelists, which I'm going to be quickly soon enough introducing them to you. But we have basically kind of put together this broad question in 3 different sub-questions. The one is to try and tap into their views and wisdom in terms of whether or not there is still room for active management going beyond 2020. One could even also make the point that even prior to the arrival of 2020, there were already a number of forces that were at play within the industry, all of which were beginning to have a direct impact on the role that active management plays within the industry. The second theme question that we have is, should you drop active management, what then is going to be left for fund allocators? To be quite an interesting point of discussion when we get to it. The third theme question is, what is the impact of technology within the industry? And joined today, I am by Adam Choppin, dialing in from Philadelphia, USA. Adam is a director and current chairman of the Association of Professional Fund Investors. Further down the line, I'm going to give Adam about 2 minutes just to tell us a little bit more about the Association of Professional Fund Investors. He is currently the portfolio manager and investment officer at Xponance, a $10 billion Philadelphia-based asset manager, where $5 billion of that is actually managed through multi-manager strategies. Adam earned an MBA in International Relations from the University of California. He has got an MA in International Economics from Yale University, holds a postgrad diploma in finance from London School of Economics. He is also a CFA charter holder. Adam, welcome to the session.
Thanks, Gandy.
Next is Leonardo Bortolotto, dialing in from London, UK. Leonardo is a director of public equities at Capital Generation Partners, a private investment office structuring institutional investment portfolios for family offices and ultra high net worth individuals in Europe. Among us, many of Leonardo's key responsibilities at Capital Generation Partners is also responsible for global public equity allocation. He oversees both traditional long-only equity mandates as well as alternatives. Leonardo holds a master's in banking and international finance from Cass Business School, a business school of the City University of London. He holds a BA in economics from Bocconi University in Milan. He's a respectable member of the APFI. Leonardo, welcome to the session.
Thank you, Gandhi.
Last but not least, certainly, in fact, in our culture, we always save the best for last. So my last panelist and the best panelist is Lorenz Auckland, dialing in from Auburn, Switzerland. Laurent has more than 25 years of experience in the financial services industry. He co-founded Anglo-Swiss Advisors in 2017, a consulting firm based in Switzerland that provides advice to asset managers, banks, family offices, and independent wealth managers. He has also been in charge of direct equity portfolio management and multi-manager programs. Laurent has been asked to join several international panels as a manager selector expert, and certainly as would be expected, Laurent is a non-executive director for several financial service companies. Laurent, welcome to the session.
Thank you, Gandy.
I'm so keen to quickly jump onto the questions, but before I do that, and as I promised, I would want to give Adam about a minute just to tell us a little bit more about the Association of Professional Fund Investors.
Thanks, Gandy. So the APFI, in very short, because we'll get to the fun stuff and not the pitch, we are the only global professional association comprised exclusively of us, of fund buyers, consultants, plan sponsors, manager research analysts, whatever you call us. If you're a manager on the call right now, we're the evil empire, we're the gatekeepers, but anyone who selects third-party managers as a fiduciary, right? We're a genuine professional association, free of commercial interests, owned and controlled entirely by our member volunteers, incorporated as a nonprofit in the UK. What we do is simple, but important. We exist to help make linkages among our colleagues worldwide and to share our best practices, exchange views, like in forums like this, and in normal times at live conferences as well, talking about the latest industry tools, managers, co-investments, whatever makes us do our jobs better. And for fellow allocators in the audience, with your participation, we can do a little more. Look us up online, profundinvestors.org, reach out to us. I promise you we don't bite.
Thank you, Adam. Now let's just jump straight into it. My first question, and I'm going to, Leonardo, if you allow me to, I'm going to put you on the spotlight because I want to raise my first question with you. And this is going to be under the theme question of whether or not there is still room for active management in the industry. But I want to ask a specific question to you. And this is, other than costs and the persistent zero to negative alpha that we have witnessed across many industries, across many geographies over the past, call it 5 to 10 years in some instances, what other reasons really are behind this massive exodus that we have been witnessing of investors crossing over from actives to passives? Other than those two, anything else that comes to mind?
Thank you, Gandhi. Sure. And actually those cost and cost, product proliferation, ease of access, all these reasons are very important and probably are the real reasons of why this phenomenon happened, and they're probably here to stay. But I think there are a lot of reasons of kind of structural dynamics that happen in the marketplace that can also be an explanation. And then the question we have to ask ourselves, and we'll debate in this panel, is whether they're here to stay, whether it will be forever or not. I mean, one is the theme of central bank policies. Because if we think about it, over the past 10 years, we've been in a world with easy monetary conditions, and what central bankers have done with their policies is really kind of generate asset price inflation, right? Asset price inflation is one thing, and then as a result of that, I mean, the volatility have collapsed. Both these dynamics have basically played well for passives and against actives. Why? I mean, asset price inflation causes everything to go up, which in a way it's good for the average passive investor, while at the same time low vol has meant less price dispersion, which means less opportunity for active managers. So that's one. I mean, I think then on top of that, you have obviously the rise of technology. And we all know that we've been in a marketplace that had very low breadth with these big mega caps, the mega caps tech giants winning. They've been winning market share. They've been kind of representing ever larger share, part of the indices, which have obviously helped market cap weighted passives or ETFs. So then obviously, you need to stand back and ask yourself, is this going to continue forever? Which is probably it's a big question. But then on top of that, we can, if I think I go a step beyond that, there's also the thematic of, there are different types of alpha. And what I mean by this is, basically, obviously the smart beta market has ballooned over the past decade, and this means that the smart beta products are really taking a lot of the easy alpha out of the game, if we think about it. So that what does that mean? That means that you had already a big number. You had like a market dominated by active managers that now have to compete with smart beta players that take the easy alpha out of the game, which means then the active managers have to kind of compete and try harder to find the alpha, and not all of them have managed to do it. Only the really skilled ones. The rest have underperformed, and there's slowly gone out of business in a way, which brings me to the next, probably last point I can think of, which is fees, which in a way, with underperformance comes scrutiny, and as fund selectors, as investors, when there is underperformance, we become more focused and obsessed about fees, and so people don't want to pay high fees for underperforming products. And at the same time, you had like a massive consolidation in the passive industry with like the Vanguards, the BlackRocks of this world, managing to push down already fees, even if they're already very low from the starting point. So now they're almost negligible. And this obviously has been kind of very attractive for investors, and it's difficult, impossible for them not to jump on board. So then that obviously creates a vicious circle, because you have less alpha, underperformance, focus on fees, and obviously it reinforces the whole mechanism. And I think all these points are probably valid to explain what happened.
Interesting points there. The one that stayed in my mind is central bank driven asset price inflation is one of the key drivers. The second one is rise of technology, especially, and then you also mentioned the third one, which is obviously different source of thematic alpha is among us the key contributors, other than of course fees and the close to zero alpha that we have witnessed from most active managers over a period of time. I wanted to follow that up with a question around whether or not then this shift is permanent, or whether we're going to see a reversal of it down the road. But I'm going to ask you to pause and park your response on that, because I want to jump on to Adam and just say quickly to Adam, in terms of, and if actives or any portion of it is going to survive is this onslaught from passives, which particular strategies of actives in your view are going to survive?
Well, so I will get to that, but let me preface that by taking small umbrage with the sort of the framing of the first question and the notion that that structurally there's no alpha because of you compete away the alpha in the marketplace. While that could be true on a dollar weighted basis, because you have a huge concentration in some very large managers who aren't able to deliver alpha because they're too big to do so, I am not convinced, and I don't think the evidence demonstrates that it's true on a manager-weighted basis, because you have a lot of sort of small and mid-sized managers that have, have plenty of more room to navigate the marketplace because of their nimbleness, and that is where, and then that gets to your question. That is where I think there is still alpha in the marketplace. It is really hard to run 150 billion and still have alpha. Right, I don't care what your asset class is, right? And it's particularly hard when you do some UK-based firms used to do, where they ran 80 billion in like emerging markets or 4 billion in frontier markets, once upon a time. Anybody remember what frontier markets was? So I think that where one of the places where it's left in the marketplace for sure is in smaller and mid-sized managers who tend to be boutiques. They don't have to be, right? You can find these folks embedded in large banks or in the Mundis of the world or whatnot. But what that means for folks like us is we got to do more work. It's a little bit harder to do because their data doesn't come in as cleanly. Their stories are not as tight. The decks aren't as clean. And that's where I feel like we have to, as an industry, focus more of our effort and be willing to just do more work. And I think and if we do that, I think there is still alpha out there, and in almost all segments. I think the other thing that will happen though is a couple of things. I mean, the easy trade has been to buy the largest 4 companies on the planet. and that's been true now for 5 or 6 years. If someone wants to tell me that's going to perpetuate for another 10, right? You can go and you can run that way, right? There isn't a political economy in the history of mankind that tolerates, concentrations of wealth in trillion-dollar companies in perpetuity. And we already see it, we're here in America, we may not have the politics to sort of rein that in yet, but in China they are, right? We see from the announcements for the past couple of weeks that they're starting to crack down on their almost trillion-dollar companies and impose regulations. And when that cracks, that means that the easy trade isn't in just the big liquid names, and that by itself can break the back of passive outperforming active, because it is impossible for an active manager to outperform a benchmark where they can't take an overweight on the largest cap names, right? It's not impossible. It's really, really hard. If you look at, managers in your neck of the woods, Gandy, like when Naspers is 30% of your local index, what are they supposed to do? No responsible fiduciary says I'm going to put 40% of my portfolio in one name, but then it means you have this. If that is the best name in the index for 5 years running, and the managers in Korea with Samsung and Taiwan with TSMC and with Amazon and Apple in America, this has been the trade for a while. So I think once that cracks a little bit, and we're starting to see that now, I think that also breaks the back passive, the structural passive edge.
Thanks, Adam. Quite some interesting points there. What though I find quite fascinating is that as an industry, we have really allowed this debate between passive and actives as the almighty debate, when in fact, and I think the reason is that we have allowed for way too long for the debate to take place between interested parties. You've got active managers on one end who are interested and who would want to defend their turf. Then on the other side, you have got passive managers. And for quite some time now, we have got this battle. And I'm not surprised as I start hearing passive managers actually starting to declare that they have won the war. Not only they won a couple of battles, but that they are beginning to win the war. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But what the question I wanted to raise with Laurent is there anything really about passives that investors are not aware of that they need to bring their attention, that they need their attention brought onto?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Gandhi. I think the common mindset is that passive is not risky. And that's not true. Depending the asset class, the underlying asset class, it's as risky as investing in active manager or even more. If you take, I will give you an example. If you take a good credit manager or a high yield manager, at least an average manager will try to avoid any default, which is not the case for a passive manager, which will not be the case for an index. And at best, a good manager will add value to that. And at best, I would say that if you have the opportunity to select a long-short manager, you will make a lot of money out of that. And bearing in mind that the index is risky, and even more risky than the active manager. And then I think there is too many people are doing this shortcut between passive management and no risk. It depends on what you are talking. When you are talking about risk, what type of risk you are talking about. And I will come back to that later on, but it's a carrier risk. It's a risk for the selector. If you select a manager with a limited alpha, even with a limited alpha, you don't, depending who you are choosing, you don't risk your life, or you don't risk your position. If you, and coming back to what Adam said, if you are to select a boutique manager and they are not delivering what they are supposed to, you can lose your job. So basically, no risk. Is it financial risk? Is it carrier risk? Is it combination risk? Because I will be tempted not to oppose passive and active. I think passive, they have the right and they have their position in every portfolio, but accordingly. And I will always fight, I always did, and I will always do, is I will always fight the idea of saying there is no alpha to grab. There is alpha. If you do your job correctly, if you start with a good screening, if you continue to select what you're supposed to select, and if we as a fund selector, and I will come back to that as well, if we are doing our job, we will find alpha. But maybe not everywhere, maybe not every time, but rule of thumb, we will find alpha.
Can I piggyback on that? Because I think Laurent takes us on the path to a really good query we should really be asking ourselves these days. I mean, what is the role of investing at all, right? Do we exist just to outperform a bureaucratically assembled benchmark? Or are we supposed to be stewards of long-term capital, the gears of a functioning capitalist system? Right? Are we? I mean, so and if we're supposed to be the latter, then it seems to me that the very notion of passive investing is fundamentally at odds with the allocation of society's surplus capital to its most productive uses. I can't imagine that Adam Smith would be sitting around being like, yeah, no, just as big as they are, that's good. You know, just put the money wherever they are already big. You know, and so I think that, you know, and it's, we have some clients who are very big, you know, $300-400 million pension plans, and you know the math just doesn't stack up where you cannot be active with that kind of money, right? You know, I sympathize with what Norges and ADIA and GIC and other big pension plans have to do, and so at some point you have to be passive because mathematically you don't have a choice, but that doesn't mean you have to be passive everywhere, and doesn't mean you can't take some decisions on the margin that either align with your values or align with your goals as a societal participant. So,
fully agree with that, actually.
Thank you, Adam. I wanted to raise a close related question on that, and it was going to be on whether or not smart beta is a mesh to the TEF that's at play. But I'm not going to do that right now out of the concern for time. Instead, I'm going to suggest that we move on to the next theme question, which is around, should you drop active management, assuming that we get to a point where it's dropped completely? What else will be left for a fund selector? What role will there be for a fund selector? And that question, Laurent, if you don't mind, please, if you can just maybe respond onto that.
Yep, thank you, Gandy. The question, if I may, I will summarize the question as, what if the value added of a fund selector? What has been the value added of a fund selector? And linked to what we were talking about before, if it's only to select BlackRock, Fidelity, and I've absolutely nothing against them, because I also selected them, I will continue to select them. But if we are only there for that, you don't need us as a community. You don't need, every type of company does not need 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or even more people team. It's unrealistic. You can run your analysis, your quant analysis easily without paying a lot of money for us. But if you need something, and the reason you need a good selector and allocator is because the first thing is to, as I said, it's not to oppose passive and active, but if you want to have a good mix, if you have to manage appropriately your budget, your fee budgeting, because all of the pensions and the institutional client are managing their budget. So if you have an appropriate fee budgeting, you need some allocator and you need some good selector. But by definition, a good selector will need to select and not to accept what people are pushing them to accept. So don't be too much trend follower. That's one thing. Too much consensus. Be against the consensus. Be a real value investor. So, so you will find good managers that are not performing well recently, but you are convinced, and you have to do your job. And then you have to have the budget yourself as a team or as an individual to travel, to visit manager, to ask good questions and all that type of thing. And my suspicion and what I'm seeing in the market right now is with the fee budget construction, the thing is a lot of companies are reducing the fees they are paying to selector. But by definition, they will not allow them to have good visits, to have good selection, and it will not selection per se. And then it comes to the career risk. You have to accept, as a company, you have to accept that your people, your selector, will do mistake. Because we will all do mistake. We did, and we will all continue to do mistakes. But you have to accept it. So if you are fired because your selection is underperforming, and the safe way to do it is to select, again, the BlackRock or Fidelity of this world, because you will have argument. Okay, even then, they were not able to outperform the market. So if even then they were not able to do it, I'm not guilty to select those big names. So why should I play the game of risking my job to select a small player, a boutique manager? And if you have that in mind as a selector, you're lost because you're not selector anymore. And I think the future for our community is really to be recognized as a value added, and not on a 3 months or 12 months basis, but as a real value added, knowing the market, knowing the manager, knowing the financial community is a value added, and to be allowed to do your job appropriately. And I think it's one of the key success factor for the next 3-5 years for a company, is to allow people doing mistakes, allow people doing their job, and don't put too much pressure on the result, because the result will come if you're allowing those people to do their job correctly.
And if I could, can I jump on that? Do we have
yes,
time?
Leonardo, please go ahead.
Because yeah, I mean, exactly. I also going back to some of the points we were mentioned before, but like, you know, also kind of piggyback of what Laurent just said. I completely agree. I mean, I think it's not whether there's only active, only passive. I think nowadays it does make sense. Active and passive should and do coexist, and that's fine. I don't think, maybe in the past it was all about actives. Then over the past few years, it's been all about at the beginning only about actives, then about passives. The passives are now saying we won. I don't think it's either or. It should be both, and a fund selector could add value on both sides of the trade. I mean, in my case, I travel all around the world, and I know, and I'm sure Adam and Laurent do the same. I try, like in the most remote markets around the world, to find niche active managers that can add value and try to access parts of the marketplace that a passive cannot operate in. And at the same time, I'm also spending time trying to pick the best ETFs or the best Marmita products for our clients. And then we blend those two together. And the combination of the two actually gives a more powerful product than either or. When it comes to passives, I obviously do a completely different type of work than when I look at an active manager. On the passive, it's important to see what is, the spreads, the tracking error of the index. What is the index? Is it replicable? Is it created by kind of a solid independent index provider? I mean, there's all sorts of things you need to check to be able to make sure you get into the right passes. Then on the active side, when it comes to doing micro caps or small caps or kind of activist / engagement type of strategies, or recently over the past few years, I've traveled all the way to China and like looking for China managers. You cannot do certain things passively, since I brought China as an example, I mean, on average, the managers the managers in the universe I'm monitoring in China have outperformed on average between 10 and 20% annualized versus indices, because you don't win with beta in China. And so it's really important to try and add value on both spaces. And then lastly, what I should say is that on top of that, the fund selector really should also do some more soft kind of value creation activities on top of just picking funds, whether it's active or passive. I mean, what we do on a daily basis these days is also, trying to get access to some of the best strategies that are closed. I mean, a robot cannot do that, or you cannot do that passively. And negotiate fees also when you invest in a new manager, or think about maybe structure a co-investment opportunity on a long only basis, when there is an amazing opportunity with some managers. So there's a lot of things we are doing that is just picking a fund or a product.
May I add something, Gandhi, on that?
Yes, Laurent, go ahead, please.
Yep. Just a short thing is the job evolved, and 10 or 15 years ago, when you would ask me, okay, what is the role of the fund selector for passive investment, I would have said, okay, nothing, because there is no investment behind, there is no investment knowledge behind needed. It's only technical. It's a risk manager task. And back to my mind, when I was heading a large team, when I've been asked to select ETFs, the first thing I did is I hired a former risk manager to select ETFs, because it's not, you don't need to have, or at that time, you didn't need to have an investment knowledge to select an ETF. Now, as Leonardo said, it's more a commingle, it's more a combined effort. And if you know both sides, it's even better for you, because you will be even better at selecting active and passive manager, because you better know the market. And the structure is abnormalized. So basically you will find good ways to select active and passive.
Thank you, Laurent. An interesting question that I would have wanted to ask would have been, obviously, the one message that's coming quite clearly from all of you guys is that it is not about pitting passives against actives or the other way around. That's certain. That's one clear takeaway that I am picking from here. The question, though, I would have wanted to ask is this exodus from passives to actives that we have witnessed now, especially over the past 24 months, call it maybe 36 months in some instances. To what extent has it been fund allocator driven? But I'm going to come back to that if time allows me to, because for now I want us to move on to my next theme question, which is basically around technology and the impact that it has had or it's going to have on the industry. And Adam, I'm going to shine the light on that one. The specific question, in fact, I want to raise with you around technology and its impact on the industry is, to what extent is technology threatening the role of a fund allocator?
I think not. Well, if it's threatening the role of the fund allocators, and those are fund allocators that probably should get out of the pool, because I don't think technology solves enough problems that it isn't sophisticated enough yet to replicate human decision making. You know, the technological advances we've seen in our industry over the past couple of years have been great, you know, because now we process data so much more efficiently. We can present it and we save time. We can be more productive as humans, but the technology still depends on data, and no amount of sort of, you know, robo advice or algorithms or AI or whatever is going to tell you how accurate or how good that data is or how reflective it is of something that some humans actually produced, right? So, for example, I have yet to see the database, the data set that can assign the sort of how much value you assign to an old track record when there's been turnover on a team. I've yet to see the technological solution that can tell me what the probability is of an analyst leaving on the the integrity of the future track record, or the integrity of the future track record based on the past track record at all, right? There's a reason why we have that stupid disclaimer on every presentation in the world, right? You know, I haven't yet to see the technology that's going to tell me what managers are going to do as the investment environment changes, right? In the way that you can sort of suss out when you talk to them in person or on Zoom, as it were now. And certainly no technology does what Leo was alluding to earlier, which is negotiate a cheaper fee schedule. And so you know, it's changed even in the you know 7 years that I've been with Xponance. You know, we've changed. You know, my daily life using technology has changed a lot. Right, we use way more databases. We use way different analytics, and it streamlined my workflow, which I like. I'm able to look at more data, more managers now, more efficiently than I was 7 years ago. But it is not. It doesn't replace the human experience. It doesn't replace the need to assess what data you're choosing to look at, and it doesn't change the necessity to interpret that data. And then, you know, the data by itself, even if you got, you know, clean data and were able to compare two managers, and let's say both had 3% alpha in exactly the same style with the same R squareds against the same factor sets, you know, what, you know, how are you going to choose between them? The technology still isn't going to answer that question for you. So I think that I love services, you know, like the DiligenceVaults of the world, the eVestments of the world, the, you know, Barras and all these things. Like, they help, but they don't replace humans yet. Maybe someone will figure that out, but I ain't seen it yet.
Mm-hmm. Interesting there. I remember a friend of mine once said, whether you think technology is a threat or is an enabler, you are both right in either way, because at the end of the day, technology is to you how you choose to perceive it as.
Yeah.
I wanted to. Yes, Leonardo, you can come through.
Yeah, sorry, I was just thinking in my head. I mean, yes, exactly. Platforms and technology, as Adam said, should be a help. Should be a help, but I'm not sure it's like the ultimate solution by itself. And then obviously, this distinct topic is actually robo advisors, which there are new platforms now that with algorithms they can actually do the asset allocation and then actually pick all the various products for you and pretty much you don't have to do anything. I think that's a reality for sure. I mean, some of these companies are generating a lot of value and creating an actual service, but I do think that's still a reality for the retail space. I'm not sure that will work or does work today on the institutional side. I mean, if you want to do something that is as low cost as possible and as passive as possible, just by picking ETFs with very obviously simple asset allocation in traditional asset classes, kind of 60-40, yes, you can do it. But obviously, when you move on the institutional side and you want to go into niche areas and you want to go into kind of traditionals as well as alternative asset classes, you cannot do that with robo advisors and with only passives. So again, we go back into the topics we were discussing before.
Well, and actually to that point, Leo, I mean, robo advisors and optimization, technologies, or borrower risk or Bloomberg risk or any of these things, all of them, right, depend on past correlations, covariances, right? And so the assertion that all of them make is that past correlations and covariances will persist into the future. And if there was a petri dish for figuring out if that stuff was really going to work, it might be like a global pandemic, something where there's no math in any quant model that dates back to 1918. And I just don't, there's, and the same was true after the financial crisis, right? All the correlations went out the window when you had, trillions of dollars being printed by central banks. I think that, they are great tools that increase the efficiency, but to lean on them like a crutch, I think, is perilous.
Yeah, and it's probably not a coincidence that the big quant managers this year, as well as 2008, they didn't really add a lot of value.
Yeah.
Interesting. What we have.
Sorry.
Yes, Laurent, please go ahead.
Yeah. No, if I may just add something is. With or without technology, one of the question of the value added of fund selector or manager selector will remain the same. Is to find good people amongst boutiques and so on. So, if you have no access to boutiques, if you don't know the people, if you don't know the people who know the people, and so on, with or without technology, you will not do your job properly. And our job is basically to find the next super jewels, the next one who will fit well a client portfolio.
Yes, indeed. Our job is to find the diamond in the rough, and that's why we still need a lot of human interaction in the search for that diamond. But before I pause for questions, there is just one other question that I wanted to throw in there. What we have seen in the other industry is that the arrival of technology has kind of cut out the middleman, what they are calling disintermediation in some industries. Now, in our industry specifically, there is also an interesting force that is arrived, and that's the arrival of millennials. They are a force in two distinct ways. One is in their individual capacity. They are beginning now to inherit a lot of wealth from their baby boomer parents who are passing on. That's on the one end. On the other end, they are also beginning to get into some senior executive level kind of appointments where they are in positions to really make some very significant decisions around how institutional assets are managed. Now, with this tech-savvy cohort of new investors on the block, to what extent really is the middleman going to be cut out because of them and also because of technology?
I think our tech savvy token millennial should take that.
I mean, I can just provide a quick my quick view on that, because we work with a lot of families, and clearly we are seeing the transition from one generation to the other, and we keep debating internally whether our model or the way we do business changes as the new beneficial owners become kind of the next generation. And I actually think, I mean, at least for now, it doesn't seem to me the model is changing. And again, we're talking about different level of sophistications. I mean, maybe, you know, kind of single investors on the retail side that want to do things in a very simplistic way. You know, obviously the millennials on that front, you might actually be able to do it at home with a robo advisor in a very simplistic way. But if you go up the institutionalization level, and you know you speak with big family offices or with big institutions, I think they're actually even more demanding than the previous generation, and they're starting, you know, they're very obsessed about private market, for example. They're very obsessed about tech investments and the tech asset class as a whole. They want co-investments. So they actually require an extra service from the allocator that you cannot do just with kind of robotically or quantitatively.
Thank you.
I'll take the disintermediation quickly.
Yes, please go ahead.
I think it's totally true that the propagation of more databases and services like the one hosting us today are helping to disintermediate discovery, right? And I think that's good, right? I think that there shouldn't be the value add shouldn't be I found it first, right? The value add should be I've made a smart decision. And so I think that actually will democratize the industry more than anything. I think that it will ultimately be beneficial for investors, but I don't think it changes the fundamental function of our profession.
Thank you, Adam. And on that note, I'm going now to jump straight into the questions that have come through from the audience. I see here I've got I've got actually quite a couple of them here. So I'm going to plead with you guys to just try and keep the responses short. The one question here is, and it's coming from, I would have loved to know from who it's coming, but it's coming from Anonymous. And they say, how have you seen boutique active managers do well in getting in front of fund selectors when we know that the landscape is so fragmented, especially given their limited marketing budgets versus mega managers?
May I take this one?
Yes, please, Laurent, jump for it.
So I think it's precisely our job as a fund selector or manager selection to find those people. So by definition, and as it's our client will want to have this value added of finding someone which is undiscovered by the big one. And yes, as a boutique manager, you will not compete with the big one. You will not be part of the selection of the multi-manager of the super big one and so on with multi-billions assets. But that one of the value added for a private bank, for instance, for a private owner is the storytelling behind. You have to say, hey guys, we find someone in the middle of nowhere. They can do even better than the big one, but they are absolutely uncovered, undiscovered, unknown. Because people have to refresh their mind that a good manager alone is difficult to find. So difficult does not mean impossible. And that's why I was advocating for budget for the fund selector, budget for the manager selection and to travel and so on, because it's the way we are selecting and finding good manager. Because we all have the same databases. We treat them maybe differently, but we all have access to the one Adam was mentioning. But it's linked to the way we look at it. If we can imagine to have a value added in selecting one manager or another, and then we will find good manager, and we'll continue to find good manager if we still exist, if we have still room to select other than the super big one.
I would say that we're as a firm, we only work with smaller boutiques, and the ones that I would say do a better job than others are the ones that are just persistent, diligent, responsive, and just follow up. I mean, say what you do and do what you say. Don't overthink it. Just be a professional, be organized. You don't have to have a big budget. Nobody's going out golfing anymore anyway, even in the pre-pandemic period. The over time, the monopoly that the mega managers had is being whittled away, and in this period of quarantine, it's particularly being whittled down. But that you just have to be persistent without pushy, and do your job well, and understand that sales timelines are very long, often years with some of us, but that's just part of the game.
I still have got quite a couple of questions there, and I would love to go through all of them. So I'm going to please ask you to make the responses as short as possible. So my next question is coming from Alex. And Alex says, do you expect managers to reflect market structure environment and adjust their processes, or do you make active decisions to switch managers during various markets? Laurent, can you take that one, please?
Yeah, sure. I think it is linked to the way we understand the manager. It's the better we understand the manager, the more we will fix and will fit with the market changes, and we'll understand why the managers change or not, and then we will adjust. I think it's again, it's a way of well understanding the manager, and it's linked with the question from Amira regarding the due diligence, the due diligence on a new manager. I think it's more and more difficult without being able to travel, without being able to have physical meetings. I have to admit, I will select for the first time ever a manager without physically meeting them. It's difficult. It's difficult. It's a different way of thinking.
Yes, those are the joys of our times, aren't they? Leonardo, I'm going to come over to you with my next question, which is coming from Edward. And he says, which markets present best opportunities for active management? Then there is a follow-up question in which he says, what is your view on frontier equities and frontier bonds?
Spot on. I mean, it's a very good question, and particularly on the frontier side, it's been the one thing I've been very focused on lately. So, I mean, as I mentioned before, what are the best opportunities for active management? I mean, I think there's loads, and as long as it's niche, generally it's good for active. If I want to summarize in a sentence. So, we mentioned before, I think all that is kind of small and micro cap generally requires, a good active management and a good active manager, particularly with MiFID II and some of the regulation that, there's no coverage on a lot of the names, and you really need to actually dive in and do a lot of analysis, and like just a passive framework doesn't really work. Another area where we actually use a lot of active managers is, as I said, engagement. So, engaged investors or turnaround specialists, obviously you need to be active. And then emerging and frontier markets. I mean, as I said before, on the emerging side, I think China is one area that is extremely interesting, and where active management has worked perfectly historically. But, obviously China is not the only example. I mean, we've seen similar things in LATAM and elsewhere. Frontier. Now, frontier, it's a tricky one. I mean, there's been huge outflows out of frontier market equities, and and obviously the asset class is extremely cheap. So if you're a long-term investor and you can actually be patient and you can stomach volatility, I think it's a great entry point. At the same time, though, the main question is, do you want to do just frontier, or you want to do kind of a best idea hybrid frontier and emerging markets? That's the other thing, because and we have a position in frontier. Clearly, over the past few years, it has not worked, but there's been so many outflows and so many assets have left, particularly from forced sellers, that we think we're almost getting to a bottom where any new inflows will actually move prices a lot. Frontier bonds, I'm afraid, we're not looking at them, so I'm not going to be able to add value on that one.
Okay, thank you, Leonardo. So I've got one of the easiest questions ever asked in any panel discussion, and this I'm going to give it on to you, Adam, and it's coming from Anonymous, and he says, or she says here, which strategies do you see to be most attractive in the short term, in the next 6 months to 1 year? So Anonymous needs exact answers on which strategies you're seeing as the most attractive in the next 6 months to 1 year.
Bespoke in-home babysitting services. Please come over now. Either that or vaccine distribution services. I do believe if I can go long, I'm all in. I mean, look, I think there's a good chance that we're in for obviously, given what's going on in the market, you would think that this is the point in the cycle when you see, sort of your traditional cyclicals and value and running up. And my hesitation is that markets in general are quite inflated, and valuations are stretched given the amount of income that was lost this year and worldwide, that it's hard for me to countenance that the markets overall should continue to, like the equity markets should continue to rally, significantly past this point. So, you could see value way outperforming growth and not making any money, right? So that's a hard one to really answer on the long side. So I think that probably the best strategies are things that we don't do, which is sort of long, short, market neutral. I think that certainly in terms of the most attractive strategies to be marketing right now would be your sort of yield replacement, market neutral, niche uncorrelated stuff that replicates fixed income, which is dead. I don't care where in the world you are, unless you're owning like South African treasuries, like there's just no fixed income market on the planet that looks attractive right now. And so for the most part, so there's I think that any of those sorts of strategies are particularly attractive, but those are also really the ones that are left out there in the marketplace are the ones with the least capacity to tolerate. And so that then drives home the point of you need active pickers, active fund selectors to really be sorting the wheat from the chaff, because everybody is going to be coming to the market with, private credit and private debt, which I don't know how much more is out there, or even worse, private equity when there's $1 trillion of dry powder. But I think that those are the areas that I think that if I were an allocator that was across all the asset classes, which I'm not, I would be spending most of my time on.
My next question here, I'm going to want to ask each one of you to actually just allocate about 30 seconds at most and just respond to it, because I would want to get the perspective from all of you. And the question comes from Edward, and he says, where do the fund selectors on this panel see a value added in a centralized due diligence software?
I will start, if I may.
Yes, please. Yes, please, Laurent, go ahead.
It's a big help. It's a big help because we were not used to have it, and therefore we needed a huge number, a very populous number of in teams. Now you are able to do the same good job with a limited number of people because you have this help, and it's now food for thought. So it's really something that has to be performed, has to be fulfilled. And then when I was talking about database, I was already including those type of database. It's really well known and it's spread over. And you have to make your mind on this type of result. And those tools are key in our job now.
Sure. Thank you. Leonardo, can I ask you to also just, share your perspective on this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would just echo what Lorenz just said. I think it's, as we said before, it's an extra tool, and we need, if we can have software working on our side, and have extra tools to do what we do best, particularly now in a world where there's more and more data, more and more noise. If we can be more efficient doing our job faster and quicker, that's great. We're definitely starting to use more and more of these.
Yeah,
Thank you. Adam, you've got 30 seconds.
Personally, I would love to never email a manager for a data question ever again in the rest of my life. I would love to just be able to look it up at my convenience and have the answer right there, and to and to make my life easier. I don't think that's practical or going to happen because even the biggest databases in the world that exist depend on user entry of information, and it's just not, the reality is people aren't that organized, especially if there's more alpha in the small and mid-sized companies. Those are the ones that are the least well organized. So that's a hard way to go. But I would love to see, whatever, whether it's this platform or other platforms, I would love to see them take enough market share and have enough data available that we can just use one or two services and get our job done. Get 90% of our job done more easily. But I'm not going to hold it back.
Thank you. Before I jump over to our final and last question, I just wanted to acknowledge the audience that have sent a couple of other questions that I didn't specifically raise here because I felt that they had kind of been already addressed in prior contributions. So there was a question from Ravi. There was a question from, it's actually all questions are from Ravi. And in fact, the last question is also going to come from Ravi. And it is, where do long, short strategies play? Okay, I'll read it again. Where do long or short strategies play in active management? I guess if I can paraphrase it to what role does long, short strategies play in active management or something like that?
Well, from my perspective, very quickly, we use a lot of long short managers, both on the equity side, on the credit side. There are different types of long short. I mean, if we summarize it, there's flexible long short, long biased, and low market, equity market neutral or credit market neutral. So we use all of them. The flexible, in my head, or in the way we put it in the portfolio, the flexible net and the high net tend to be more on kind of the growth side of the book. The long side, the high net, the high net or the flexible net, I tend almost to put them in competition with my long only guys. The low net or the market neutral guys actually go into the diversifier section of the book. Obviously, for all of these, you generally need an active manager. And as Adam was saying, particularly in this environment where volatility is finally spiking, long short active makes sense, and probably will be a great source of alpha over the next few years.
If I were to flip the question on its head and ask, is there a role or is there a role for long short passive strategies? I think everybody on this panel will be like, ugh. Like I've never allocated to one. I would never really look at one seriously. So I think they have to be active.
Right. I don't know about you, gentlemen, but from my end, I would have wanted this conversation to go on for the next 1 hour, if not 2. I also still had a couple of other questions that were coming through from the audience, and I also had my own questions that I meant to go back to. but as we would all agree, time has not allowed us to do so. But that basically then takes us to the end of our discussion. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank you very much. Give big thanks to you, Adam. Big thank you to you, Laurent, as well as a big thank you to you, Leonardo. I really enjoyed moderating this discussion. I look forward to more interactions and discussions like this. And mine at this point now is to basically hand over back to Guillaume. Guillaume, back to you.
Yes. Well, thank you very much to all our panelists, Laurent, Leonardo, Adam. It was great, and obviously our moderator Gandhi. Thank you very much for sharing your experience and your views. As you can see now, we've posted a new poll. This is the final poll. So as we close this webinar, please share your views on this. And we would also like to thank all our participants today for choosing to spend this time with us at DiligenceVault and our community. As ever, we appreciate the feedback. So we'd love to hear from you. Or if you have any questions, please come to us. You can find more information on our website and also our newsletter. And in the next few days, you will receive a follow-up emails with the key takeaways from today's discussion, as well as a recording of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Cheers.